Ancient Rome is known for many things, including its grandeur, its art, its aqueducts, its roads, its military might, its legions, its emperors, its Colosseum, its gladiators, its debauchery, its orgies, its politics, its intrigue, and of course its food. But one thing it's not known for is space travel, despite the fact that Romans were the first to observe a comet and make accurate predictions about its return, which makes this execution method truly unique. This is the story of a man who defied the laws of physics, gravity, and nature itself when he was sewn up in a sack with a rooster and thrown into the Tiber River. A long time ago in a faraway land, there lived a king and his son. Now, the king had worked hard for many years to build his kingdom into something great, and he hoped that his son would follow in his footsteps and continue the legacy. But unfortunately, his son wasn't like him at all. He was lazy, he was stupid, he was slow, and he was violent. And one day, the king had enough. He was so fed up with his son's antics that he decided to get rid of him once and for all and ordered that he be executed by one of the most terrifying methods in the entire ancient world. In ancient Rome, one of the strangest and most horrifying executions was called punacule, the punishment of the sack. It was reserved for the crime of parricide. Imagine being sewn up in a sack with a snake, a dog, a monkey, and a rooster, then dropped into a deep, dark river and left to die. This is exactly what happened to the king's son. He was tossed into the river, into the dark depths, never to be seen again. At least that was the plan. What actually happened next is where this story takes a turn from the ordinary into the extraordinary. Because as the sack began to sink into the muddy water, the animals inside panicked. They began to attack each other in the dark, biting, scratching, and clawing in every direction. And the sack, made of leather, began to rip apart. Soon, the dead body of the king's son emerged from the sack, followed by the dead bodies of the rooster, the snake, and the monkey. The dog managed to swim to safety. Now, you may be asking yourself, how does this defy the laws of nature? Well, back in those days, it was believed that the human soul was immortal. That means it never died. Instead, it left the body after death and went off to the afterlife. What's important here is that the soul was believed to occupy the body after death, preventing it from decomposing. In other words, a dead body couldn't rot, it couldn't decay, and it certainly couldn't be eaten by fish. However, the people of Rome saw the king's son emerge from the sack, pale, lifeless, and still wet from the river, but otherwise intact. His eyes were wide open and staring, his mouth was open in a silent scream, and his limbs were contorted in unnatural angles, as if he were still thrashing around inside the sack. People started whispering that the gods had brought the king's son back from the dead to punish him for his crimes against his father, the king. But others argued that this was impossible. After all, the body had been underwater for hours, and it looked perfectly normal, which meant only one thing. The king's son's soul hadn't left his body. He was truly dead. News of this bizarre incident spread throughout the empire and reached the ears of Pliny the Younger, the Roman philosopher and natural scientist, who wrote an account of it in his letters. In his letter to the historian Tacitus, he described the scene in graphic detail, writing, "There was not even left for the executioners any part of the body to cut off and throw in, since the whole body was borne toward the bank, though already half carried away by the stream, on which a few old men cried out, 'Woe! The gods themselves are taking vengeance upon thee.' For my part, I could hardly believe my eyes, whether what I saw was really so, or, as the rustic has it, a ghost raised up by magic or by sorcery. But Pliny wasn't the only one who was shocked by what he saw. Everyone was talking about it, wondering if it was a miracle or a curse. Some said that the king's son had somehow survived the ordeal, and that the animals had just caused some damage. But as the body was examined more closely, it became clear that this wasn't the case. The skin was cold and clammy, the limbs were stiff and rigid, and the eyes were cloudy and opaque. The king's son was definitely dead. And yet, as Pliny pointed out, the body showed no signs of decomposition. It didn't smell, it didn't ooze or leak anything, and it didn't attract any flies or other insects. It was as if the laws of nature had been suspended. Now, let me ask you this. What do you think happened to the king's son? Do you believe that he was miraculously resurrected by the gods to be punished? Or do you think there's another explanation? Let me know in the comments below. As for Pliny, he was absolutely baffled. He had never seen anything like it before, and he didn't know what to make of it. He wrote to Tacitus, "You know that the soul is immortal, and does not depart from the body even after death, until it has suffered the penalty which belongs to it according to the law of its crimes. But surely it is enough that such a penalty has been inflicted on him, without having it inflicted on his body also. For what is the meaning of punishing a dead body? What end can the gods accomplish by torturing a corpse? Or what purpose is served by tearing and rending a lifeless form?" But Pliny's confusion was only matched by the horror of those who witnessed the king's son as punishment. No one could understand how the body had remained intact after spending hours in the river. Some said it was a sign of divine wrath, others said it was a warning to stay away from the river. But most were simply terrified and stayed away from the area altogether. And so the legend of the boy who was sewn up in a sack with a rooster and thrown into the Tiber River became a cautionary tale throughout the empire. Parents used it to scare their children into behaving well and not killing their siblings. Priests used it to remind their followers of the dangers of sin and the consequences of defying the gods. And philosophers used it to ponder the mysteries of life and death and the immortality of the soul. But in reality, what really happened to the king's son? Did he really defy the laws of nature, or was there a more rational explanation? Well, according to Pliny, he did defy the laws of nature, or at least the laws of nature as the Romans understood them. But according to modern science, there's a much simpler explanation. The reason the king's son's body did undecompose right away is because it had not actually died. According to doctors, it's possible that the boy was in a state of suspended animation, also known as a death-like state. This is a rare medical condition in which the body temporarily stops functioning, causing the heart to stop beating, the lungs to stop breathing, and the brain to stop working. In this state, the body is essentially in a deep coma and may appear dead to anyone who examines it. But after a short period of time, the body usually starts to function normally again. The reason why this happened to the king's son is unknown, but it may have been due to a combination of factors, such as the shock of being sewn up in a tight sack, the stress of being thrown into a river, and the lack of oxygen. Whatever the reason, this is likely what happened. The king's son wasn't actually dead. He was simply in a state of suspended animation. And so the legend of the boy who was sewn up in a sack with a rooster and thrown into the Tiber River is actually a story of survival against all odds. Talk about a happy ending. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and leave a comment.